So thank you very much for the invitation. I have to tell you, it's been a fascinating couple of days to hear all of you present about your work in a field that is quite unknown to me. Of course, I know some through Maiken and Lea and Jens and Ning through our collaboration in the networks that Maiken were referring to. But it's been a great educational couple of days for me to learn about the work going on all around Europe to preserve and disseminate knowledge and research into the institutions and collections of our school heritage. But now to something completely different in a sense, because what I work with is, well, I work at the National Gallery here in Copenhagen, a big art collection, and I work with the dissemination and reuse of our digitized collections. But my angle today on this topic is how we can learn and create educational experiences with open digital cultural heritage. So the learning perspective is there. Before we begin, I'd like to mention that I've put my slides on SlideShare, where you can find them at my page. It's up there in the corner. And the slides are with an open license, so you can download them and reuse them. A little bit more about me. I'm an art historian by training, and I work as a curator and senior advisor of digital museum practice. I've done everything from researching practices of digital work in museums globally for many years, to building websites and apps and social media experiences, and also have written the open licensing policy for our museum, and have therefore sort of learning by doing style practiced into the fascinating field of copyright regulations, which is a big part of my everyday life. I've started a conference about what open licensing could do for the cultural heritage sector in 2011. It's called Sharing is Caring, and it takes place both in Denmark biannually, and it also travels around to other places in the world who want to discuss and promote the idea of openness. So this year it takes place in Stockholm and Amsterdam, for instance. I'm very involved in Europeana, which is the platform for Europe's digitized cultural heritage, with more than 50 million digitized items from all the member states. I'll get back to that in a minute. I've been very involved in the whole organization of Europeana, being the chair of the Europeana Network Association for a couple of years, and now I serve on the European Commission's expert group who provides advice on digitization and Europeana to the member states. So I really work with digitization both at, internally, locally at my own museum, but also as an advisor and what can you say, collaborator in the Danish sector, where we try to work a lot together, and also in an international setting. I chose this picture as sort of an introduction to me, because I take a very playful approach to cultural heritage, and I think actually that's a great way to to learn about culture is to use it and to play with it, because when you touch culture, when you are not sort of at a distance from it, but when you're able to do stuff with culture, then you remember it and you have a positive feeling about it because it's been fun and it's been engaging. So that's very much my approach, learning through reuse. This is my museum. Being the National Gallery of Denmark, we have special obligations. We are the biggest art museum in the country with a collection of approximately 250,000 artworks. We have 300,000 visitors a year. And our collection spans from the late Middle Ages until the present day, which means that a lot of the collection is so old that it's free of any rights. And this is an important point when we talk about opening up the digitized cultural heritage and the things you're able to do with it. We're working on digitizing our collection. It's a slow process because there isn't a lot of political will to invest in digitization of cultural heritage in Denmark. So it's very much ad hoc and going along as at the pace we're able to. But we have 30% digitized approximately, so that is something. So I thought it was interesting to start my talk with the title of this conference, this symposium, where you're tackling challenges for the school museums and history of education in a time of globalization and digitization. Because, as I said, school museums is really not my field of expertise, but globalization and digitization, I think I can give you some perspectives on. We all know that we live in a time of global challenges. We're facing a climate crisis, we're facing increasing inequality, migration happening due to wars and conflicts all over the planet. We're seeing technological disruption, which is both bringing some amazing solutions, but also some very scary perspectives in terms of our security and rights. And all of this is bringing about a decreasing trust in political systems. I think we're standing at a point in history as a sector, the museum sector, the cultural heritage sector, where we all have to learn how to address these challenges because they're burning issues. We have all been introduced to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and they're becoming increasingly an ambition for all of humankind to try and solve together. So we're seeing more and more museums also trying to contribute to discussing and answering these development goals. Did you all know that there's a museum projected to be built here in Copenhagen, which is all about the Sustainable Development Goals and how we can bring people together to tackle them? It's going to be named UN Live, the Museum for the United Nations, and it's not the normal kind of museum. It won't have a collection. It won't show normal exhibitions as such, but it's going to be a platform for people to come together both on-site but also online and in local hubs to tackle the global challenges we're facing. And one of the people who started this initiative is the Danish Icelandic artist Olafur Eliasson, who might be familiar to some of you. And he explains some of the ideas behind UN Live here. UN Live is a platform which, through culture, tackles the subjects and conflicts UN is engaged in. Today, there's probably no one over 10 years who hasn't heard of climate change. But there's quite a leap from having heard about it to gaining a physical experience of it. Culture is a language that enables us to talk about subjects that can seem abstract. One of its foremost qualities is that it makes its subject visceral. I have great faith in UN as a system, but it fails to make itself understandable to ordinary people. That's why the very important agendas of UN need to be expressed in new ways. So here he's talking about what kind of relevance museums can take on in a time where all people on this planet are preoccupied with some really serious questions. And going to a museum or looking at our exhibitions can maybe feel less relevant to some people who are not already interested in art and culture, facing, as we are, some more pressing things maybe in the surrounding world. So one of the key issues here is to try to make what we do more relevant to people. Nina Simon is director of the Museum of, what's it called? The Museum of Art and Culture in Santa Cruz in California, I think. And she's written a couple of really seminal books about museums in the digital age. One of them is called The Art of Relevance from 2016. And here she says, relevance is a key that unlocks meaning. It opens doors to experiences that matter to us, surprise us, and bring value into our lives. And the way Nina Simon thinks that relevance is going to open up is through participation, through engaging people not only in looking at our research and our exhibitions, but actually participating. In another book she wrote, The Participatory Museum in 2010, she says, as more people become accustomed to participatory learning and entertainment experience, they want to do more than just attend cultural events and institutions. They expect the ability to discuss, share, and remix what they consume. When people can actively participate with cultural institutions, those places become central to cultural and community life. So participation in this sense creates the relevance. So at the National Gallery of Denmark, SMK, we have been trying to work with participation for a number of years. In our first digital strategy in 2009, we decided to commit to being catalysts of users' creativity, to shift the focus from the museum as a destination where people should come and learn something, to being a facilitator, an enabler of learning that would reach out and facilitate the kinds of creative and educational practices that our users were interested in. At the moment, we're halfway through a project called SMK Open, which deals with, it's actually quite a boring infrastructure project. We're tying together the different databases we have so that our metadata and our images and our audio files and our publications and our videos can all be searched and enrich each other. And we try to make all the content as open as possible. And one of the important aspects of this is that we have open licenses on our content. So you can freely download high quality images of the artworks that are free of rights and do whatever you want with them. We use the Creative Commons public domain dedication, CC0, which designates and tells people that the images belong to everyone, and you don't only have permission to, but you have the right to use the images for any purpose you like, also commercial purposes. In this way, we try to democratize our cultural heritage. As I said, with the National Gallery, we're supposed to be for everyone, but not everyone goes to museums. Not everyone loves the physical museum visit experience, and not everyone has the ability to visit the museum. As I said, we have approximately 300,000 visitors a year, but in principle, we should reach out to all 6-7 million Danes. And also because we live in an age of digitization and globalization, potentially we could reach out to the 7 billion inhabitants of planet Earth. Our strategy really stresses that we are SMK for all. And I'd like to read a little bit from this strategy. Being the National Gallery and main art museum in Denmark, SMK carries an important responsibility towards the entire country and beyond. The vast collection of 700 years of art is common national property, and ideally everyone who lives in Denmark share a sense of ownership to this unique cultural heritage. Our work is based on the conviction that the artworks in our rich collection has a role to play in the society that surrounds us through its ability to deepen our understanding of the world, its peoples and histories. We believe that the development museums have undergone in the past decades, which is becoming more participatory, more open, holds the key to engage far more and more different people than we reach today. So the question we try to ask ourselves in SMK Open is how can digitized cultural heritage contribute to meaningful personal experience, relevant new insights, and ultimately societal development? Quite a mouthful. But as I started out saying, we live in a time of extraordinary challenges, and we're a sector who has potential and abilities to contribute to better solutions for everyone. One of the real challenges we're facing is in this process is that one thing is, okay, we want to try to contribute to a better society, to better lives, to more education, to more learning, more creativity. But how can we measure that we reach our goals? The kinds of metrics and tools we have for measuring our impact often come to a stop when we want to try and assess the impact we're having. But within the Europeana network, we have tried to address that this is not a local challenge. Museums and libraries and archives all over the world are facing this demand from the public, from politicians, from funders, to be able to demonstrate that it's worth investing in museums, it's worth investing in the special kind of educational and experimental and experience-based learning environments that we can offer, where people can engage and participate in a different way than in classrooms. And I've been part of a Europeana task force who has tried to develop a tool set for the cultural heritage sector to tackle how to do impact assessment. And I'm going to play you a short video that introduces this tool set. So the Impact Playbook is free online. I added links, of course, in my presentation so you can find it. I'm not going to go deep into the playbook today, but just wanted to introduce the concept to you and show you how we have tried to use it ourselves. So as I mentioned, Europeana is the platform for Europe's cultural heritage in digital form, but it's also, importantly, a network of 2,000 professionals like all of us who come together to face these common challenges with shared solutions. And the idea of impact is really what I think it's what we all believe that we have when we go to work every day, because working in the cultural sector, we're quite passionate people, and we're people who maybe choose careers that are not the most lucrative, but we really believe in the cause that we're contributing to. But what the Impact Playbook tries to hand us is kind of a cookbook or a step-by-step guide, as it said in the video, to also demonstrate that impact, not only in quantitative numbers, but also in broader narratives to the stakeholders that we need to collaborate with. Ultimately, our users, who we need to be relevant to, but also politicians and funders and our local communities, etc. So impact is much more than clicks and likes. It's the changes that occur for stakeholders in society as a result of the activities that we set into motion. For instance, when we say, we're going to do a new exhibition about this research we made into this school museum history. We think it's a fantastic idea because we are really interested in it. But what kind of change is it going to have for our users? As I said, wanting to be a catalyst for this change puts museums in a new role as facilitators rather than destinations or ultimate end goals of what we do. And in SMK Open, the idea is that when we put our collection Samling, it says over there, into public domain, we get all of our data collected into an approachable, accessible data set, which you can find on our own web page, but also through open APIs and on other platforms because it's openly licensed. And that results in people outside the museum taking our data and doing things with them that often we don't even set into motion. We just put out the resources so others can let their imagination run free. An important point I want to make in this is that even though our work is about opening up digitized resources, our strategy is actually to try and bridge the digital and the physical, because we have experience and quite some evidence by now that it's often in the meeting between what digital can do with the physical that the biggest impact occurs. So I'm sure you remember Ramesh's matrix from yesterday, and I thought that was quite useful. So we have this, you can say, the area of traditional museum work, which deals with enlightenment in a physical environment. And you have the sort of the experience economy in a digital age, maybe over here. And also Legoland and the more sort of commercial, cultural experiences. And then you have your online encyclopedias and so on over here. But we are quite interested in facilitating projects and initiatives that somehow collide around the middle of this matrix. And I'm going to show you some examples of how we do that. And I have to say that it's not been a conscious strategy all along. We've really been sort of putting down the rails as the train was going and experimenting and failing forward and everything. But over a course of, as you could see, our first digital strategy was in 2009, so over approximately 10 years, we can see when we look back at our most successful and rewarding projects that the action is happening at the center of this matrix. So I'm going to show you some examples of how we try to facilitate and be a catalyst for learners and creatives. And here are some of the learners. So Maiken, you already mentioned that we have a great collaboration around Wikipedia with a number of Danish cultural heritage institutions where we come together once a month with volunteers from Danish Wikipedia and people who are interested in learning how to write Wikipedia articles and contribute their knowledge. It's not a huge network, but the people who come are very dedicated to it. And the thing with Wikipedia is that because it's an open encyclopedia, which we can all access without paying a fee or logging in or anything, is that it's created by volunteers who are not paid, and it's based on openly licensed content. So all the images, all the video, all the audio that you find in Wikipedia articles is openly licensed, and you can not only access it, but you can reuse it. But someone needs to offer up that open content. And Wikipedians are crazy about museums because we have trustworthy sources. We know the kind of content we have, it's researched, it's decent. So for them, it's really a rich resource for doing their work. It has enormous impact, also quantitatively, to be present on Wikipedia. For SMK alone, we had 35 million page views with images from our collection last year. We're a whole bunch of very different cultural institutions who come together in this network, both libraries, archives, the Film Institute, university, and art collections. And one of the things that Maiken and some of your colleagues are working on at the moment is to try and develop learning materials for secondary and high schools so that we as cultural institutions can help education institutions to learn how to not only be more critical of the sources you meet online, but also learn how you can participate in creating knowledge online. I think this is one of the places where I'm seeing a small rim of a contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals. Another educational project is a video calendar in 24 chapters, thank you, which we did in collaboration with a guy called Peter Kjær. He used to do TV in Denmark. He was very popular, but he got fed up with the short deadlines and the superficial TV productions, and he became an art historian. But he still has this very public, popular approach to being an art historian. So he tries to open up art history through more popular means. And he came to us and he said, I see you have great high quality images that I can do whatever I want with. I want to make a video calendar. You know, in December, you have like calendars where you open one window every day and there's a new image. So the idea here is to take one artwork with a lot of details and then open a new window every day where he explains in a very playful and relaxed tone a new story about this artwork. The thing is that other than putting it on our website and on YouTube, etc., where people could enjoy this in their sofa or wherever they at work or whatever, we also did a big launch event at the museum on 1st December last year, where Peter Kjær did a lecture and went into the collection and showed the original artwork. There was a really big interest in not only following the digital art calendar, but also seeing the original. But because it's digital, it has a much wider reach than the approximately 100 people who came to the launch event, as you can see here. We also work with Danish public schools to bring our digitized collections into classroom, into learning environments. A couple of years ago, we did a pilot project where we collaborated closely with teachers around their curricula to try and push artworks into their learning schedules. And allowing students to not only look at the artworks, but because they are openly licensed, to actually play with the artworks in a digital environment. Together with the teachers in 19 schools, which we tested this with, we provided 142 digitized artworks, 40 videos featuring artworks, and co-created student interpretations. And these education designs were tested, and we got some really valuable feedback to develop this further. The idea here is to bring the playful learning styles of using your own creativity into the educational process, because I think anyone who has dealt with education knows that one-way classroom education is not always the most efficient way of putting new knowledge into young people's heads. But it's once you actually participate and use your own creativity that some of this new knowledge will stick with you, because you've had this hands-on experience. Our other main sort of target group in this project, SMK Open, is creatives. So coming back to our ambition to be a catalyst for our users' creativity. And here are a couple of examples of how we've worked with that. Europeana did a project together with a couple of partners called Van Go Yourself. It's a very playful app where the idea is that museums upload artworks with open licenses, so you're allowed to play with them. And then you get together with friends at a party or in a classroom setting, and you recreate the artwork as a tableau vivant. You take a picture of it, you upload it, and then you have like a comparison of an old master painting and your own playful reinterpretation of it. And we're really taken this also into the physical museum. This is at an event we did a couple of years ago, where we made sure that there were props available for the guests, so they could, dress themselves up as an artwork. And while this is a very fun parlor game, it's more than that, because people had incredible exchanges, discussions, and spent a lot of time on really getting it right. And I believe that when you do that, you're never going to forget that artwork again. You look very closely at it in order to get all the items and the people into the right positions. And you have a very positive social experience around an artwork. So it becomes part of you. It's also interesting to see how an open approach like this can really have quite an outreach. So, for instance, BBC Radio in London picked up on this app and did this remake, which got a lot of views. So this is also a way to bring our collection out to a lot of people who would never have the ability or the chance to visit us, or maybe didn't know we existed. A fascinating thing that we're working quite intensively on at the moment is 3D scanning our collection. We don't really have resources to do this ourselves, but there are communities of super dedicated people like the Wikipedians who go around with hand scanners and voluntarily scan cultural heritage. And we just had a guy 2 weeks visit our museum and just scan. And because we want the open licenses, they can go on to their website. So we sort of do a trade-off. They scan, they get access. The quality is spectacular, at least for accessibility and use value. It's not, you need some more specification if you need it for research and preservation purposes, but it's a starting point. Then we're featured on this website. It's called My Mini Factory, and it has a part called Scan the World. And our collection is there, and we can also embed it on our own website. So it will be a part of our new online collection, which will launch later this year. And creatives are picking this up as well. I'm not going to show you, this is a video of almost 5 minutes, but it's an artist couple called Nuline and Oscar Jacobsen, who merges the Venus de Milo with the Apollo Belvedere into kind of a transgender sculpture, which they've shown at several exhibitions. So you can check it out at this website. Another Europeana project was the Culture Cam, which was a way to make search into big databases more playful, which we also contributed to and showed at the museum. So again, taking the digital back into the physical space. The database is full of artworks, but you don't search by typing in search words. You search by standing in front of the Culture Cam, and then it reads the colors and patterns on your clothes. It searches in the database, and then it returns artworks with the same or similar colors and patterns. So it's a way to open up and democratize search in huge archives. If you don't know already, if you're not an expert, then you can still search just by something you're wearing. We also have invited artists and designers to come to the museum and exhibit remixes of the old artworks in our collection. So we did a little pop-up exhibition, just 3 days, but we exhibited the remixes by young artists and designers right next to the originals. Also to open up people's minds about the potentials of the old artworks that to some people can seem irrelevant. This young guy who was lying on the floor was checking his projection of a remix of 22 painted skies from Golden Age paintings from the 19th century in our collection, which was projected onto the wall of the ceiling of the museum, so it kind of virtually opened up to the open skies. Another designer created casual clothes out of quite unknown paintings in our collections because she wanted to bring the art to the streets. So people wearing the artworks would be able to sort of show all of the hidden treasures inside the museum. And they did these incredible labels, not only with washing instructions, but with the whole story about the artwork. So very educational in a sense. A real sort of makerspace STEM project was a Finnish artist who took a Hammershøi painting and created a pop-up version of it with a movable light source and a little melody box, and attracted a lot of people to come see how you can enjoy Hammershøi in a 21st century way. A fun project was a collaboration with the 3D modeling and printing platform Shapeways. It's kind of a community for people who like to create models in 3D. And then there's also a marketplace, so they can put their products in an online shop and people can order them, and then Shapeways can 3D print them for them in material of your choice. And they contacted us and said, hey, we have some really cool jewelry designers in our community. They would love to be inspired by your open paintings collection. So we did a contest, and within a few weeks we had more than 300 entries from all over the world of jewelry design based on old paintings in our collection. And the winning piece of jewelry was based on this 16th century German painting and was a necklace printed in one piece of strong and flexible, which is a sort of a very durable plastic. Really taking the composition and the meaning of the painting and putting it into a contemporary piece of design. So I hope you see all the time the red thread here, that the digitization of our collection turns back into physical objects and social experiences where people come together and they both express their own creativity and they learn something. Couple of last examples is with we have a community at the museum of young creatives called the Young People's Art Labs. It's young people between 16 and 25 years. They come together at the museum once a week and they co-create projects and events for other people. They take the National Gallery as their starting point, but they make it their own and they do it with their publics. They did a great project combined with the Copenhagen metro construction that's going on. It's almost done now, but you maybe seen the construction sites around Copenhagen on your visit here. But all these construction sites have been quite annoying for the locals. So this project, the young people went out and they talked to the neighbors of one of the construction sites, and they co-created a huge remix, 70-meter long remix of artworks from SMK, where the locals had influence on the design and the expression of this big tapestry. And it really made a difference to the locals, because they felt like this construction site was not just an ugly, negative place anymore. It was beautified and fun and playful. They had gotten some control back, you can say. Another project we did last year is the last example I'm going to mention. These are some of our art pilots. They're wonderful to work with. And every year there's a democracy festival for young people taking place in Copenhagen. And these wonderful youngsters, they are very preoccupied with social inequality, with the fact that museums often attract special, sections of the population who have big educations, more money, more capital, etc. So they want to figure out how can we reach out to the others, other people who don't use museums so much. And the project, one of the many projects they did for the Democracy Festival here last year was to collaborate with 7 organizations for vulnerable young people. Organizations who help people at a young age who suffer from depression or suicidal thoughts or eating disorders, or maybe are struck by cancer at a young age. So our art pilots teamed up with the organizations and they developed a taboo workshop. The idea was to break the taboos that young people in these vulnerable situations face, because they feel very alone with their problems. They feel it's taboo to talk about with others. And often this just adds to their problems, that they can't talk to anyone. So using open art to not have to talk about in words the difficult issues, but to visualize them. And we did that by giving people at the Democracy Festival an audio track to listen to, where they could hear other young people telling them about these problems of having cancer or eating disorders or depression, and then inspiring them to create collage, to express these emotions and experiences. And we did then actually an impact study of what kind of effect did it have on the people participating in this workshop. One of them said, it's easier for me to express my emotions through images or drawings, because then I don't have to explain everything. And then other people can make their own sense of it and relate to it in their own way. And one of the other things that was said, these are some of the nice collage that came out of the workshops. It's like art changes character when you can touch it with your own hands. You're able to look at it up close. It means a lot to be able to hold the art between your hands and touch it. So digital becomes physical, and that actually has an impact. Because when you go into a museum, you can't touch the artworks. It's prohibited because of security and preservation purposes. But digitization actually allows the artworks to become physical, touchable objects again. So what we got out of trying to do this taboo workshop and trying to see the kind of impact it had was that there were 2 sort of major finds, and we call one of them expression. The creative process is an icebreaker that enables the participants to put into words and or images the difficult emotions they feel or are confronted with in others, helping them grow and show empathy. So being able to express themselves. And the other is impression. Working creatively and intuitively with their hands provides a breathing hole, an open space, a chance to forget oneself and to reflect on their own emotions on a deeper level. So it actually had some impact for these young people, both the ones who participated with their stories and also the ones who participated in the workshop, to be able to work with difficult emotions in a visual language where we provided the building blocks. So there's an interesting potential when we try to not separate out enlightenment experience, digital and physical, but when we try to actually think creativity and learning and digital and physical together, I believe. You can read the full impact study on Europeana Pro. There's a link down here, a direct link, where we have really unfolded how we use the impact playbook, the different tools, and the kinds of results we got from it. You can find much more about Europeana Impact at this short URL. So, to conclude, this is a big mouthful to try and tackle the Sustainable Development Goals. But we are trying to think about, through the kind of work we do in SMK Open, how we can maybe contribute to some of these 17 development goals. For instance, quality education, reduced inequalities, innovation and infrastructure. But also, when putting together this talk, I see some aspects where we can maybe also think out of the box of our ordinary scope on how we contribute to better health and well-being, to more sustainable cities and communities, to climate action, as Olafur Eliasson said, and also ultimately to peace and justice and strong institutions in our society through the trustworthy resources, the decent and always, well-crafted data we put out. This is a strong resource to succeed with this. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Merete, for this very, very interesting presentation. Any questions? Yes.
It's not a question, it's more of a comment. Very inspiring, thank you. I think it's so important what you're doing, because it's about, we're tackling the what do we want to achieve, instead of what do we want to tell, and then through what we want to achieve, then we sort of go into the how and the what. And that's, I think, a very important reminder for all museums, that because we are so into the our collections and these special items, everybody should know what it is so special, but why? And having the focus on the public, it's so important, so thank you.
Welcome.
Anyone else?
Thank you for very rich presentation and colorful some Friday in August your museum was open, not whole night, but maybe to midnight. There was excellent, and I chose this opportunity to visit it. Question is the reaction of your financed board on your decision to open access, including for profitable use of your picture.
Yes, this was it took a couple of years to discuss internally to open up our collection, not only for educational and research, but also for commercial purposes. There were two main issues. One was, are we going to lose money? Because normally museums charge for sharing when people want to use their image files. And the other one was, are we going to lose control? Because when we just open up the gateways, then people can do whatever they want, and maybe people will abuse this opportunity and do something that we don't approve of. We looked at the financial side of it, and when you took away the administrative overhead of our business model, okay, there was an income on selling the images, but then when you added the work that went into handling the transactions and writing the emails and finding the pictures in the database, etc., it evens out the income. I know there are some museums around the world with very, very popular artworks, and they have a revenue which is substantial, but it's quite few. And the thing was that when we went through this process at SMK, we could read studies from other museums around the world who already did this before us, and they said, we never made any money on this anyway. It's a myth. It's a lot of work that goes into doing duplicate effort over and over again. Now we live in an age of digitization. We can just put the images in an open online database, and the users can take them themselves. it saves us a lot of work. I know this ties into a broader discussion of the automatization of society. We can maybe talk about that over coffee because it has a lot of implications. But for the financial side, we looked at the numbers and we could see we're not going to lose a lot of money on this. It's a fraction of our annual budget. Then the control side. Here we had some basic discussions about what is the purpose of a museum, especially a publicly funded museum. We have collected these artworks on behalf of the public. We preserve them on behalf of the public. If the rights have expired, it's not up to us to decide what the public does with it, because they're in the public domain. So we really had to talk about that and understand, because we're the experts and we feel that we should have a say about what the artworks are used for. But when you read the law, it actually says that copyright is a temporary exception to the public domain, which belongs to everyone. So it's actually our duty to lose control. You're welcome.
Any other questions? Yes.
In Holland, we also have a discussion about open data, and well, one of the reasons some institutions don't want it is because you lose the context of an image, or well, in an instance for a history wall charts, the use of the wall charts is probably they only take the picture and then the context is gone. So what can you do about it?
It's a really good question. One of the role models for SMK in this has been the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. Mm-hmm. And they opened up their huge digitized collection in high quality in 2012 or 13, I can't remember. And they did that because before they took the decision, they did a survey of the internet. And they looked at some of their most famous artworks. So, for instance, Vermeer's Milkmaid. And even though they had control over their own quality copy of the artwork in their database, and they charged for access to it, there were 10,000 of copies of that artwork online anyway. So that's one thing to just remind ourselves, that we have lost control already. Then you can actually do something to regain some of that control, and the Rijksmuseum has actually proven that by, opening up their great quality copy, because then, the internet works like if an image is high quality and it comes from a trusted source, it will rank higher in Google search, so people will see it first. Also, when Wikipedia uses one of your images, Wikipedia is one of the most visited websites on the internet, I think number 5. That also is favored by Google, so again, this ranks your image higher. So, when people search for something on the internet, they very rarely go to page 2 of the search. So they take the first, the best, and if it's actually a good image, they'll take yours, and it will have the metadata. So it's a way to sort of regain some of the control that we have in fact lost. The other thing I'd like to say is that artworks, in broad terms, I know of course wall charts are a subsection of this, but artworks were not created for experts. They have research value, they have educational value, but they also have visual value. So even though some people might use wall charts without the context, it might provide them value and relevance because it's a great picture. And I think we should also think about this, that we can broaden the scope of our relevance to people who don't think like us. Yeah.
I think we have to wrap it up now and say thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah.